Oh boy, he's back. Young Sinatra's back. Hoopa-doopa-doo. Yo! I can't believe it. The fourth one.
Hi everyone, Sponge the Bob Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Logic album, Young Sinatra 4. This is the latest commercial release from Maryland rapper Logic, and what he says is the final installment in his Young Sinatra series, referring back to some of his earliest mixtapes and singles, Young Sinatra Undeniable, Young Sinatra 2, Young Sinatra 3. Projects and songs that are pretty boom-bap centric lyrically and instrumentally, throwing it back to the golden age of hip-hop in the 90s. And Young Sinatra 4 pretty much follows suit in that tradition. This thing is 14 tracks, well over an hour, much longer than I would want to be listening to a Logic album, but there are just a handful of unnecessarily long songs that kind of contributed to that factor. And it's something that I'm kind of smiling and laughing about, because when it comes to Logic albums, I personally feel like I am perpetually stuck in this constant Groundhog's Day-like state. Each new Logic project is me waking up to a new day, and I swear to myself each time, this time it's going to be different. This time I'm going to love it. This time it's going to click. This time all the positive feelings that I have toward Logic will be manifested into a glowing review, but it just does not turn out that way. And I'm not trying to say that Logic makes the same album over and over and over. I certainly don't think that, but roughly I end up having the same feelings and experience over and over and over. And it's frustrating to feel that way generally each time, because for the most part, I like Logic. He seems like a pretty nice guy, seems like a positive dude, seems like, in a lot of respects, a breath of fresh air in mainstream hip-hop. And despite boldly wearing his very contemporary influences on his sleeve on past records, I think he's a pretty talented guy. Dude can really rap. And even though people try to deride him as corny for speaking on issues like racism and colorism and depression, I think his artistic efforts on those fronts, for the most part, have been thoughtful and with good intentions. Plus, I think his albums so far have had far greater shortcomings than his personality, his positive outlook, or whether or not he says anything about being biracial. He does have a funny bar on this record, though, talking about how since he's gone platinum, he identifies as bi-coastal. I thought that was kind of a funny shot back at that whole thing. That being said, though, a great deal of the appeal of Logic's music is couched in his positive outlook, in his good vibes personality. I mean, just listen to the intro track on this album, Thank You. It's not a song that I love. It's sort of a bland, spacey piece of glamorous boom-bap with a bunch of general motivation bars, trying to push listeners to, I guess, be the best version of themselves and follow Logic's example in fighting for your dreams and chasing after what you want. The track is kind of predictable, but my biggest issue with it is that a great deal of its runtime is taken up with just a clip show of all of these fan voicemails just telling Logic how much they love his music, what it means to them, which if you're not inducted into the cult of Logic, it's probably not going to mean all that much to you. Still though, I'm sure these fans love that inclusion. I'm sure the fans generally love this inclusion. And if you listen to what the fans are saying in these messages, it highlights exactly what I'm trying to say here. They say he's so inspirational, his music means everything to them. You show me that anyone from anywhere can be anything they want to be. And there are a few different groups of people who might see this message as a little corny. Those who are just really negative, bathe in negativity, they're just hateful dirtbags. People who understand that life can be really unfair and that maybe there are systematic oppressions at work that might prevent certain marginalized individuals from achieving greatness. And people who are self-motivators who don't really need Logic to throw empty platitudes at them to go out there and make the best decisions for them. Personally, I kind of fall into that last group, but I don't ultimately see Logic's positive message as being one of the biggest issues I have with his music, at least on this album anyway. If there's a graver problem I have with Young Sinatra 4, it's that the boom-bap sound Logic bathes in on this record is presented in a kind of weak fashion. Logic's approach to boom-bap is kind of squeaky clean. It's a neutered and toothless take on this classic East Coast style. It's far from the soulful, urban, rugged, and gruff sound that came through on records like Illmatic and 36 Chambers, Strictly Business, Ready to Die, The Infamous. This thing is like the Disneyland of boom-bap records, essentially. Logic does his best to embrace the sound. He goes as far as to get every living Wu-Tang member on one track of this thing, and titles it Wu-Tang Forever, which I'm sure took a lot of effort on Logic's part, and it is one of the somewhat better moments on the album. The beat hits pretty hard, it has some pretty exciting verses here and there, though a shockingly short one from GZA, You God, Inspected Deck, and even Capadonna, I think, lead to a bit of a lull in the track. And RZA, for some reason, sounds more awkward than everybody on the song. I don't know why they wouldn't have done another take of his verse. He just sounds really, really off. Really, the track is more exciting in name than it is in practice. And not to say that there aren't quality tracks on this album, I think there are. The song Everybody Dies, which transitions really well into The Return. These tracks are pretty much rapid-fire mixtape Logic back in full form, dropping bar after bar after bar after bar about his reach, his motivation, his work ethic, his versatility, talking about modern music coverage, essentially being rap TMZ, dropping memorable bars like I had a lot of dark nights, I been Bane. So those two tracks, pretty catchy, pretty great energy, good flows from Logic. I also liked the track The Glorious Five, which is a bit of a moodier, more personal number, tones it down on the instrumental a little bit. Logic rapping about his family ties and his issues with his father on this track, wishing he played a greater role in his childhood. On this song, Logic also struggles with enjoying the life that he's built for himself now and understanding that his upbringing brought him to where he is, but simultaneously wishing things had been different. I also appreciate the similarly positive message on the track One Day, but personally the glamorous pianos and the Ryan Tedder hook on this track, it's a little too much. Like, this is not a Macklemore album, this is not an Eminem album, this is the last thing I want to hear. This is glitzy to the max, and it gives me a headache. Though, when Logic said no class, like bomb threats, that's a bar. We get more sweet and peppy pop rap on the track Ordinary Day, which features a dance beat, some speedy rattling hi-hats, super artificial synth chords, a super weak singing voice from Logic at some points. This is just not a track I'm interested in at all. Really my least favorite song on the entire album. And even though at about this point on the album I'm about to succumb to a sugar coma, I do dig the humorous tone, the funk beat, and the Roadrunner flows on the track 100 Miles and Running. Even Wale on this track is pretty good. And the vocal harmonies that pop in just before his verse, strong Michael Jackson vibes coming off of that. I'm not typically somebody who is super impressed by fast rapping, but even when Logic busts his fastest flows toward the end of the track, I was like, wow, good boy, good job, Bobby, good job, Bobby. With the title track on this thing, I can see what Logic is trying to do here, but it just feels like way too much of a rehash of Young Sinatra 3. There's so much common ground between these two tracks, right down to the Nas sample, that I just wish he went off and did something different, especially considering there's a great beat switch in the middle of the track with some fractured, jazzy piano chords, and some of Logic's best bars on the entire album as he breaks into this riddle-like verse where he is rapping from the standpoint of money, but he's not telling you he's money until the very end of that verse. Saying things like, I'm the reason the Titanic sank, I'm always there for you, yeah, when it comes down to the wire, and some people will even tuck me away until they retire. I usually come around on the 1st and the 15th. So all these little money hints and clues, the things that money does or the things people do for money, and then revealing that at the very end. Super smart, super sharp. An example of how creative and focused Logic can be as a rapper, but it's such a pivotal and interesting point in this song. It really overshadows everything else the track does. I just wish Logic pulled this section out and just made it its own track because it was so well executed and such a cool idea. The song Street Dreams 2 was kind of alright. It's like listening to the rapped synopsis of the most intense action scene at the end of a bad blockbuster film. There's a car chase, and there's police, and there's gunfire, and the car flips, and his friend gets shot. His wife was abducted. He gets back to her, and then he was the one who abducted her the whole time. Oh my god, what a twist. What? Horrible twist. And then at the very end of the track, Logic wakes up, because it's Street Dreams. It's a dream. It was some real groan-worthy M. Night Shyamalan reveal type shit. At this point on Young Sinatra 4, I think some of the songs and ideas are beginning to wear thin a little bit. The Adventures of Stony Bob is essentially a generic stoner track, and while I don't mind Logic hopping onto this theme on this very bland boom-bap beat, what I do mind is just how boring and lifeless all of his friends and featured guests on the track are. Like, the talent gap between Logic and these guys is very wide and very apparent, as their performances on this track are pretty awkward. Though again, I kind of get that on this thing, Logic is, even though it's a commercial album, he's in mixtape mode. He's just kind of kicking back with his friends. He's doing whatever he wants. He's indulging in the whole boom-bap thing. Legacy, though, I found to be a strangely sad track where Logic lyrically goes over his work ethic and how that is kind of working against him as he is focusing more on his music and his legacy than his health and his family and his loved ones. And even though the point on this track where he's rapping from the standpoint of his own son and his significant other, it just sounds like rushed and off the cuff and really bad, I do find it interesting that it seems like he's playing out his own personal issues in a different scenario, because instead of leading a seedy lifestyle or getting addicted to drugs, he's more addicted to his own fame, his, again, legacy, his music, his work. The song Last Call is pretty much Logic telling his life story in relation to his come up in hip-hop music. He kicks the track off saying, "Hey, Kanye did it, Cole did it, I couldn't wait to do my own Last Call track." So if you're not 100% wrapped up in Logic's backstory and everything that it took for him to get to this point, then this song might kind of feel a little underwhelming for you, especially at 10 minutes in length. I know it grows tiresome for me, especially as the song essentially devolves into him telling a story about the first time in 10th grade his dad brought him to the music studio. But what I find hilarious about this track is how Logic fans will typically jump down my throat saying, like, "How can you say he sounds like Kendrick? How can you say he sounds like Cole? How could you say he sounds like this guy?" Despite the fact that on this track, he literally admits to and says, "Hey, I just grab my ideas from these other artists who are my contemporaries," whether, again, it's on this song or it's on the Mac Miller shout out earlier on the album. And look, I'm not trying to say that he sounds like Kendrick Lamar all over this record. In fact, I didn't really catch any spots where I thought he was kind of pulling off a Kendrick song or a Kendrick flow like he has in the past. But it's painfully clear that Logic listens to the artists around him. He's a fan of them. He grabs ideas from them. And sometimes the stench of the artist that he's borrowing from is very clear on a particular track. I mean, you wouldn't say on Wu-Tang Forever Logic's not trying to sound like the Wu-Tang Clan. Still, though, I think Last Call is kind of a heartwarming end to an album that his most hardcore fans will most likely get a lot out of, certainly more than they did Bobby Tarantino 2. I'm pretty happy for the guy. It seems like he's continuing to see a lot of success. Even though there are a few moments on this thing where Logic might seem like he's lacking in a bit of self-awareness in regards to his own fame, or might be feeling himself a bit too much to the point where he's pretentious, generally he seems just sweet as pie on this record, just like a really genuine, authentic, likable dude. And this album here is kind of like the hip-hop equivalent to a self-help speech, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but at the end of the day, I just feel like Logic's music is just okay. I wouldn't say it's dumb. It's certainly not offensive. He certainly has a good baseline level of talent to execute the things that he does, but artistically, I don't think it's the most profound. And philosophically, I feel like that's also the case. It's just very middlebrow, I guess. I'm feeling a strong 5 to a light 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Logic, Young Sinatra 4, forever.